Okay, I think that we can start. So at the beginning, I'd like to say thank you for your coming, because I know that it is really difficult after a really intensive day to be there. And I know that some of the audience decided to go home to dress up, to do some makeup before today's party, because it seems to be really nice. So I encourage you to join. The topic of my presentation is security. Only developers can make it proactive. But at the beginning, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Beata Szturemska, and currently I'm working as Java developer for Jira Cloud in Spartes in Gdańsk. But before, I was working at Intel as cloud software engineer. And today, I'd like to share the case study which had happened in my previous company. I was working there on the project with some cryptographic elements. It was some microservices with enhanced privacy ID algorithm and ACDSA. But also I'd like to tell you something about my free time. I really like cycling. Last year I took on my bike 7,000 kilometers. But I have to say that in Gdańsk we have really a good environment to go by bike. There is a lot of forest, but there is also the seaside, so I encourage you to visit Gdańsk. So let's move to agenda of my presentation. Firstly, I'd like to share the case study which had happened in my company. Then I would like to share with you the plan of my attack. Then, only if demo gods will be with me, I will be sharing you with some demo. And last but not least, I have prepared a bunch of takeaways from my presentation. So today I'd like to go step by step from being an engineer to being an attacker. But I'm not a really good hacker, but I will tell you more about it later. So at the beginning, I'd like to say something about Agile in our companies, because in many job offers now we can see some information about Scrum, extreme programming, being Agile, but from my perspective it's only the buzzword, because I'm trying to look at that process from the developer perspective. And there are a lot of companies, when I'm talking with my friends, in which people are working in a small teams that can be fed by one pizza. They have daily meetings, they have backlog, they have retro, they have demo sessions, but there are a lot of elements which seems to be familiar with old tier waterfall. For example, at the beginning, in many companies we have really comprehensive documentation. And from my perspective, it is really difficult to have a knowledge about all bottlenecks, about all difficulties which we can have at the development process. So I think that this is one of the problems. Another thing is that in many companies there is a lot of before release activities. So there is a need to go from security development lifecycle. There is a need to send our project to pen tester. There is a need to have integration test. And also this sounds like waterfall, not like Agile. But what was the problem in my company? I was working in a small team. We thought that we have delivered all required features. And then we have prepared our package and we would like to send it to the cloud. But then our security team came and told, okay, there is one problem. We have to do all this before release activities, and we would like to send your package to pentester team to ask them about feedback about your project. Okay, it's fine. So they send our source code, they've prepared a special environment that can be attacked. And after 2 weeks, we get a report which look like that. There was information that in our application, we are using a component which has no known vulnerability. This component was Spring Data REST, and pentest team pointed out that this is really easy to be exploited and have big impact. But when we asked them to try to exploit this vulnerability, they told us that they don't have enough time. So what I did, I decided to try to do it on my own. But it will be a disclaimer. As you saw in the introduction, I'm not a security expert, and if the whole knowledge about security will be as big as that screen, so probably my knowledge is as big as the dot that you cannot see. So I have some basic knowledge about security from my studies, but definitely I'm not a security expert. But during my attack, I can ask my friends from security team about help. And I will have at least 2 tips from them. So first of all, I went to the CVE details webpage to gather knowledge about this vulnerability which was in our application. CVE database is the place when you can report some potential vulnerabilities in different applications, and then they are verified, they are scored, and they are on that web page if they are confirmed that there is a problem in some software, in some third-party components. And my problem is the second one from the list. This is this CVE. And you can see that it was scored to 7.5. So when the scale is from 0 to 10, it's really high score. And you can see some basic description that there is a patch request which can be exploited. So 7.5 sounds a bit terrifying. I was afraid of it, but I decided to try. The next step of my research was finding on GitHub an example application with this vulnerability. I decided to use this application to try how to attack our environment and then to use it during real attack. But there is the first thing that my security colleagues told me, that I should create my own virtual machine. And there is a list of different advantages of having your own virtual machine. First of all, you have fully control to client and server side. You can deal with all side effects of your requests, and you can master your attack. Because as you can see during my presentation, I was failing. Many times I did something wrong. And probably if I will do it on our environment, I can break it, or I can, for example, wake up our DevOps and lose my friends. So this is the configuration of my virtual machine. There are 2 users. One of them is MTBGirl, and this is the attacker. And the second is God Mode, who run this vulnerable application. And this application is listening on the port 8080. A few words about application architecture. There are only 3 classes, so it's really easy. We have one class which is Spring Boot Loader, and then we have entity, which is an object which we put into the database. And there is my entity repository class, which handle all operation like find by name, find by attribute, and all stuff like that. Some simple requests to that application, so get to get all entities, post to add new entities, getting entity by ID, and this request patch, which will cause our problem. So let's move to the demo. Okay, first of all, I'd like to create CURL request. And there is a first information that if we don't change nothing in configuration of our Spring Boot application, after calling the default path of our application, we will get information about all endpoints which we have in that application. So as you can see, in my application, there is an entity endpoint with pagination and with sorting, so we will use it. I have prepared also the first data which I'd like to load to my application. This application have in-memory database. So I will have post request and I will put their data some motivating stuff. Okay, so this data was added to the database, and then I will show you the request, which will be able to broke that application. So we have to prepare request, which is type of the patch, and then this request have to have header application JSON, patch JSON, and this is the content of that JSON. The most important part here is that one. We have Java get runtime class, and then we have exec method, and into this method we will send command which we would like to call on the remote host. So let's run this. And we have the response that that application was run in God mode. So as you can see, I have possibility to call something not on my user. To make you sure that I will have another output, when I call this command locally, I have output mtbgirl. Okay, so I can try to call another command. So I will replace who am I in exec method to ls. And then here I can see content on of the file in which this application was run. There is one more thing that I like to show you. So I will replace who am I with cat etc passwd. And there is no output. My research was quite brute, quite sightless. So I don't understand what's the reason why I cannot call this. It will be explained later in the presentation, but for now I know that it does not work. But let's move to the presentation and try to understand what will happen, what was happened, and what was the reason of this vulnerability. So as you can see before, I had the possibility to call who am I or ls, but I cannot possibility to call another commands. So that application, this is the class of that application, my entities repository, uses annotation repository rest resource. And each time when we use that annotation, we have some endpoint exported to the client. So in our case, this endpoint have a path entity, and this annotation not only exposed the most popular endpoints like get, post, or put, but also this one, this patch, which was vulnerable. The easiest way to protect you before that vulnerability is setting attribute exported to false. So it was really easy to check that my application is not vulnerable, because each time when we use repository rest resource annotation, we have attribute exported set to false. So I thought, easy, I can take a coffee break. But as you know, kitchen is one of that place when we have the best ideas. And then I can hear my internal voice who says, Beata, you should check documentation. So let's do this together. It was really useful tip, because I found the information that even you don't use repository rest resource annotation, some endpoints are automatically exported only when you are inherit from a CRUD repository class. So if we use paging and sorting repository, we have also that endpoint by default exported. And here is the information that the name of that endpoint will be taken from the name of the object which we put into the database, and it will be pluralized. So let's check how it will work in my application. I will connect as God mode and stop that application, and then I will go to source of that application. Okay. So as you can see here, so far I was using repository REST resource annotation. Now I'd like to comment this line and run this application again. And after a while, I will display you the list of endpoints which are exported, and we expect that the name of this endpoint will be my entities, because this is the name of the class which we put into database. So let's try to do this. Maybe I will do this. CURL. Okay, can you see any errors? Yes, I can see. Okay, and as I said before, we have my entities endpoint available in the application. So let's check one more thing. If we really use that annotation with exported false, if this endpoint will be hidden. So I will uncomment another line. I hope that you are able to see everything and I'm not speaking too fast. Okay, so let's do this again. And now there is no endpoints, but we can still use method get by name, get by attribute if only we implement it. Okay, so let's move the application to the previous state, because my demo is prepared to run with the previous version. Okay, and let's run it in the background. We will be back here after a while. So as I said before, I had possibility to do who am I or ls, but I cannot do another command like cat etc passwd. Do you have any idea what I can do to have access to that remote host? Okay, I suppose that you know, but you are afraid to share your knowledge. The easiest thing which came to my mind was adding my public SSH key to authorized keys on the target machine, and then trying to set up SSH connection, and then I should have possibility to run all commands. So let's try to do this. At the beginning, I have to put this first entity to the database. So I'm running that script which I running before. And then let's think what I can do. I thought that the easiest way to add something to a file is using redirection. So let's try to replace who am I in the previous command to echo DevConf rules, and let's try to redirect it to the file df.txt. And the output is quite surprising, because when I will run it locally, there is no output. And this is the next time when I don't understand what had happened, but I decided to try to find another way. So my next brilliant idea was to use set editor, because it allows me to do some in-place modification of files. So let's show you my SSH authorized keys. For now, there is only some key, and then let's create pretty smart one-liner. So sed -e, then we will append some data, and it will be new key. and we will try to add it to SSH authorized keys. Let's verify the result. It was working. So I was almost ready to send that request to target host, but then I decided to verify one more thing, in which way paths are represented when I'm trying to do calls with usage of this vulnerability. So I have prepared another command. Here you can see, with usage of echo, I'm trying to display some path. This path is to authorized keys on another user, which is God mode. So let's call that method. And here is our next problem. Because all slashes was replaced by dots, so Java probably trying to avoid such situation, and I had to find another solution. But I was really close to give up, because I think that I have used all methods that can be used. But then it was the second time when I can expect help from my security colleagues, and they sent me an article about reverse shell. So I went to the web page. I have read before something about reverse shell, and then I have a list of commands in different languages, which allows us to get reverse shell. This three probably will be the most important for us. I've tried to run each of this command without this malicious request, and then when I know which of this command is working properly, I have used it to attack. But let me explain what reverse shell exactly means. So now we will change a bit our approach, and we will start listening on an attacker device on the port 4444, because usually hackers use that port, so I'd like to use it also. And then I will try to force that target machine to connect to my port, and if it will be successful, I will get reverse shell. So this is the idea what I would like to achieve. Okay. So let's start from the beginning. This is my request. Here into parameters, I have put socat command, because as I said before, this is the only one that was working in this environment, because when I'm trying to use, for example, netcat with -e option, it was impossible, because there was netcat in another version which not support this option. So I put this command exactly, I copy-pasted, and I put it to the exec method. But before, I have to start listening on the port 4444, as I said before. And if my connection will be successful, we will see their information that, okay, you received a connection. So let's try to call that request. Not that one, that one. And we're getting information that something went wrong. And this is the moment when I had to at least try to understand what was the reason of my previous problems. So let's move back to the presentation. And let's visit my favorite web page. Redirects with bin bash from Java runtime exec. And somebody's asking why it does not work. And we have exactly the same problem which I had before, because we have echo blah to blah.txt, and then we have output exactly the same as I had. And the response is here. The cause is that exec uses simple string tokenizer, which is based on the white spaces as a delimiter. So this is the reason why I cannot use redirection, for example, because everything which is passed after the first space is treated as argument of this call, and this is the reason why it does not work. There is also another web page that I have visited then, it was Java documentation. And I found the information that there are not only exec which takes string as a parameter, but there is also another command which takes a string array as a parameter. So I decided to split the socket command to the proper array and try to call this. Okay, so okay, I need a while to think about my. So I'd like to show you how the request will look like now. I have socket splitted into 3 strings. The first is the name of the command, the second is the first argument, and the third is the second argument. The second string is the first argument, and the third string is the second argument. Okay, so let's try to call it. So I have exactly the same CURL which I had before, but now I'm passing this file with this JSON to this code. Okay, and as you can see here, nothing happened. But maybe if we have some Java developers here, they can see that I have used modern Java notation where we create an array with usage of square brackets. But in old Java notation, we had another way to create arrays. So it is using new keyword, then the name of the class, square brackets, and then exactly the same command which I had before. So let's try to call it. And as you can see here, we have information that connection from localhost received. So good. So let's try to do forbidden command so far. So let's try to do echo. Okay, and let's try to display this file. Seems to be fine. So let's try with etc passwd. And it's here also. So as you can see, I have masterized my attack, and then I was able to verify if this request will be harmful also for our environment. So let's move to takeaways. This slide is only to take a brief before the summary. I heard that if in your presentation there is no cats, then your presentation wouldn't be memorized. So I give you a chance to remember me. And as you can see also, this is good motivation speech that we should never give up. But let's move to the technical part of the takeaways. First of all, if my experience means that we should end up with component upgrade. Yes and no. Or yain. Probably yes, probably no. Definitely we should keep our components up to date, and definitely we should do it as soon as it's possible, because when we think about some bugs which had happened before, we can think, for example, about Java deserialization problem. When the first vulnerability was reported, then a lot of researchers started working in the same area. And as a result, we have a long list of vulnerabilities in the same area. So when we have some known vulnerability, it is worth to invest some time to understand what was the reason and to protect our application before being hacked in the future. What is more, a lot of companies, as Intel, Amazon, Google, and almost every company have their own bug bounty programs. So these companies encourage people to search some vulnerability, and when the one vulnerability will appear, then there is the really high possibility that in the same area we will have another one. There is also another thing that I'd like to mention, because these days in each company we are trying to automate everything. So we are trying to deliver continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, and it's really fine, especially when you have microservices. But on each step, you can take some action which allows you to make your application more secure. So, for example, we have a code review. It's fine, but it's not always working, because in my career I had situation that we had committed to master pull request, which adds new dependency to our project, only because IntelliJ suggests another import that we usually use in our application, and as a result, we have two exactly the same libraries, but there are two possible places when we can have some vulnerabilities. Another thing is adding some security plugins to our IDE. I wish you understand me well. I'm not thinking that adding all plugins to your environment will be the best solution, because probably your IDE will become extremely slow. But you can try at the beginning, add, for example, only one of them, verify how many false positives you have, and then you can decide if you would like to use it or not. Another thing, there is some pre-commit pre-commit hooks, which, for example, allow you to check if there is no secrets committed into the master. On the other stage, we have some dependency managers. So, for example, we can implement in our continuous integration OWASP dependency checker and verify if there are some new version of components that we are using in our application. And on each step, we have another thing that we can do to make our application more secure. So let's try to sum up all takeaways from my presentation. First of all, I encourage you to try yourself in security. As you can see, I have fun from that what I'm doing. The second thing is that I have prepared a speech, and I can attend in really good conferences, not only here in Krakow, but also in Oslo or in Dublin. So it gives me opportunity to meet really nice people. What is more, and what we do in my previous company, is organizing internal capture the flag contest and some security workshops. This is opportunity to encourage developers to get familiar with security, to try themselves, and it's also opportunity to security teams to discover some security talents. And we had such situation in our team. The best person from Capture the Flag started his work as a security researcher, so it works. The next thing is keeping your third-party components up to date, and I'm pretty sure that after my presentation, you are persuaded to do this, because there is only a small effort that you have to put into your application, and you can be much more secure. You should monitor logs of your application, and you will see some suspicious behavior. You can also try to avoid some attacks. And last is a bit general, but I think it's also really important. Automate, automate, automate. I think that automating everything is a good idea, especially when it's something that we do almost every day. So I encourage you to try to automate different steps or your development process, and to add some security plugins, security elements to your code and to your application. If you have any question, this is the best moment to ask them. And if no, I encourage you to stay with me in touch. So if you would like to get this request which I was using during my presentation, you can send me a message and I can share with you the whole data. So if there is no question, enjoy your break.